Hello, friends, and welcome back to our quiet little journey into the past. Tonight, let's talk about something we all take for granted: privacy. Specifically, the privacy of the bathroom. We think of it as a fundamental right, a small, locked sanctuary in a busy world. But what if it wasn't? Let's imagine a time when one of life's most private moments was often, well, surprisingly public. We're heading back to the Middle Ages to ask the question, just how horrible were their toilets? And the answer might be more sociable than you think. It's a strange thought, but it peels back a fascinating layer of medieval life. If you enjoy pondering these peculiar realities of history as a way to unwind, do consider leaving a like or subscribing to our channel for more gentle stories. As always, I love to hear from you, so feel free to share your time and place in the comments. Alright, find a comfortable spot, let the lights sink a little lower, and let the sounds of your world fade away. Together, we're going to explore the very different, and very public, world of the medieval privy. When we consider the horror of medieval toilets, our modern minds immediately leap to the physical discomforts, the cold, the smells, the basic lack of sanitation. And while all of those were certainly true, perhaps the most jarring difference, the aspect that would feel most alien to us, was the near total absence of what we would consider privacy. In the 21st century, the locked bathroom door is a sacred cow of social etiquette. For much of the medieval period, the very concept would have been baffling. To understand why, we have to understand the fundamentally communal nature of medieval life. For most people, from the serf in his wattle and daub hut to the lord in his great stone castle, life was lived in public, surrounded by others. People were rarely alone. Great halls and castles served as dining rooms, courtrooms, and communal sleeping quarters for much of the household. A lord and lady might have a private bedchamber, but even there, trusted servants often slept on pallets at the foot of their bed. Privacy was not a cherished value. Community and security were. You were part of a family, a household, a village, a guild. Your identity was defined by your relationships with others, and your life was lived in constant, close proximity to them. This communal mindset extended to almost every aspect of life, including bodily functions that we now consider intensely private. The act of using the toilet, for many, was not a solitary retreat but just another shared activity. This idea wasn't new to the Middle Ages. Their Roman predecessors were famous for their grand public latrines, where citizens would sit side by side on long marble benches, conducting business, exchanging news, and socializing while attending to their needs. The medieval world inherited this casual attitude, even if they lost much of the Romans' sophisticated plumbing. We see the peak of this communal design in the monasteries. As we've touched on before, monastic rereorders or necessariums were often long halls with dozens of toilet seats arranged in a row. For the monks, this was a spiritual exercise as much as a practical arrangement. The Benedictine rule, which governed many monasteries, emphasized humility and the suppression of the individual ego. By performing this basic, leveling human act together, in the open, they were reminded of their shared creaturely existence and their commitment to the collective body of the monastery. There was no room for pride or shame in the necessarium, only the functional reality of life lived in common. Even in the supposedly private world of the nobility, the lines were blurry. A high-ranking lord might possess a private garderobe, but his life was still far from solitary. He would conduct much of his daily business from his bedchamber, and it was not uncommon for a lord to use his close stool, an enclosed chamber pot, often elaborately decorated like a throne, while still in conversation with his attendants or advisors. The act was functional, necessary, and not something that needed to halt the flow of daily life. The physical privacy of the garderobe was a luxury, but the social expectation of solitude during the act itself was not nearly as rigid as our own. For the common people in towns, public privies built over rivers or managed by the town council were, by their very nature, shared spaces. They were functional necessities, and the idea of waiting for a private, locked room would have been an absurd luxury of time and space that a bustling medieval town simply could not afford. This was a world where personal space was a fluid concept, and the functions of the body were seen as a natural, unremarkable part of a life lived largely in public. It's a mindset so different from our own that to truly grasp it, we must try to step inside it. Let us imagine, then, that you are a traveler in the 14th century. You are perhaps a merchant, journeying with your goods, or a pilgrim on your way to a holy shrine. The road has been long, and as dusk begins to settle, you are grateful to arrive at a large, well-regarded monastery that offers hospitality to travelers. You are shown to a clean, simple cell for the night and share a meal of bread, cheese, and ale with the other guests in the hostelry. The atmosphere is one of profound peace and order, a welcome respite from the chaotic world outside. As the evening wears on, the need arises to find the latrine. You quietly ask one of the lay brothers where the necessarium might be. He nods understandingly and points you down a long, vaulted stone cloister, its arches framing a central garden where herbs grow in neat, orderly rows. The air is cool and still. You follow his direction and arrive at a large stone building. You push open the heavy oak door and step inside. The room is long and high, and surprisingly bright, lit by several tallow lamps. Your eyes adjust, and you take in the scene. Along one wall is a long, polished oak bench, with perhaps 20 keyhole-shaped openings, each one a toilet seat. Low wooden partitions, rising only to about waist height, offer a token separation between them. Several of the seats are occupied by monks, their dark robes a stark contrast to the pale stone walls. They sit in silence, their faces calm and impassive. Your modern instincts scream at you. There are no doors. There are no private stalls. There is no privacy. A feeling of intense awkwardness washes over you. Every fiber of your 21st century being wants to turn around and leave, to wait until the room is empty. But you are a 14th century traveler. This is normal. To show discomfort or embarrassment would be to mark yourself as strange, as someone who doesn't understand the way of the world. So, you take a breath and walk further into the room, your footsteps echoing slightly. You find an empty seat, a polite distance from the nearest occupied one. As you settle onto the cool, smooth wood, you are intensely aware of everything. You are aware of the man to your left, an old monk with a long white beard, who is so still he might almost be meditating. You are aware of the man to your right, who coughs quietly into his sleeve. You are aware of the gentle, constant sound of rushing water from the channel running beneath the bench, a sound that is both cleansing and public. You don't know the etiquette, but you learn by observing. No one makes eye contact. No one speaks. There is a shared, unspoken understanding that one should be as unobtrusive as possible. You fix your gaze on the stone wall opposite, studying the patterns in the mortar. You try to project an aura of serene indifference, just like the monks around you. You try to convince yourself that this is no different from sitting on a bench in a marketplace. But it is different. The experience creates a strange tension in your mind. It is at once deeply personal and completely public. You feel an acute sense of your own physical body, yet you are also part of a silent, collective tableau. It is a form of social interaction that has no modern equivalent. You might hear the soft rustle of a woolen robe as one monk stands and another takes his place. You might hear a quiet sneeze followed by a muttered benedicite. It is the sound of life continuing, uninterrupted by this basic necessity. After a few minutes, which feel like an eternity of social self-consciousness, you are finished. You stand, adjust your own clothing, and walk back towards the door, your eyes still fixed ahead. As you step back out into the cool, clean air of the cloister, you feel a sense of relief that is both physical and social. You have navigated the unspoken socializing of the necessarium. As you walk back to your cell, you reflect on the experience. You realize that the monks' lack of embarrassment was not a performance. It was genuine. They had been trained to see their bodies not as sources of shame, but as simple, functional vessels. They had been disciplined to see themselves not as private individuals demanding solitude, but as integrated members of a community. You realize that privacy is not an innate human need, but a cultural invention. It is a luxury that this world, this mindset, has not yet conceived of. And you fall asleep that night with a new and unsettling understanding of what it truly means to live a life in common. The silent, communal world of the medieval toilet, with its striking lack of privacy, represents a profound psychological gulf between our time and the past. To us, it is a social nightmare. To them, it was simply the fabric of life. But the challenges of medieval sanitation were not limited to the social sphere. Beyond the awkwardness of a shared latrine, there lay a host of very real, physical dangers. The price of convenience, such as it was, could be perilously high. The very structures designed to carry waste away also introduced a unique set of vulnerabilities, turning a moment of relief into one of potential dread. Let's first return to the castle garderobe. We've established it as a mark of nobility, a private luxury. But this luxury was often built on a precarious foundation. A garderobe was essentially a stone box, a small room cantilevered out from the main castle wall, hanging in midair. It was supported from below by stone brackets known as corbels. While medieval masons were masters of their craft, building structures that have endured for 1,000 years, their knowledge was based on experience and tradition, not modern structural engineering and material science. Over time, mortar could crumble, stones could shift, and the constant exposure to the elements could weaken the structure. The result was a small but terrifying risk: structural failure. There are historical accounts and archaeological findings that point to garderobes collapsing. Imagine being the unfortunate occupant, sitting high above the ground, only to have the floor and seat give way, sending you on a fatal plunge into the moat or onto the hard ground below. King Henry III's mother-in-law, for example, reportedly had a new garderobe built after the one she was using collapsed with her in it, though she luckily survived. For every recorded incident, there were likely many more unrecorded near misses or collapses of unoccupied structures. The very design that made the garderobe effective, its projection away from the castle, also made it one of the building's most structurally vulnerable points. This vulnerability was not just structural, but military. A castle was a fortress, designed to be impregnable, with every potential weakness reinforced. Yet, the garderobe's chute, by its very nature, was a hole in the castle's armor. It was a direct, albeit narrow and foul-smelling, channel from the outside world into the heart of the castle, often leading near private chambers. During a siege, a determined and slender attacker or assassin could, in theory, attempt to scale the castle wall and infiltrate through this unguarded opening. While incredibly difficult and dangerous, it was a known weak point. The defenders, in turn, were aware of this. They might install iron grates, known as grills, at the bottom of the chutes to prevent such intrusions. There are many tales, likely embellished over time but rooted in this strategic awareness, of the privy being a place of danger. One story tells of the capture of Richard the Lionheart's rival, Duke Leopold V of Austria, who was supposedly identified and captured when a page was spotted carrying his master's ornate belt to the privy. A more dramatic, though likely apocryphal, Legend surrounds the assassination of King Edmund Ironside in 1016, who was said to have been stabbed from below by an assassin hiding in the cesspit beneath his toilet. Whether true or not, the persistence of such stories reveals a cultural understanding that the place of greatest privacy was also a place of surprising vulnerability. The dangers were not just from below. An archer with a well-aimed shot could potentially fire an arrow up a garderobe chute, a terrifying prospect for the occupant. And it wasn't just human enemies. The chutes were open invitations to rats and other vermin, which could climb up from the moat or cesspit, bringing with them filth and disease, right into the living quarters of the castle. Beyond these immediate architectural and military hazards lay the far greater, though less understood, danger of disease. The medieval system of waste disposal was a perfect engine for the spread of sickness. As we've noted, the castle moat became a festering brew of human and animal waste. The town river, receiving the contents of public latrines and street gutters, was little better. This led to the widespread contamination of water sources. The same river that served as a sewer might, further downstream, be the source of drinking and cooking water for another community. Wells located too close to leaking cesspits would inevitably become contaminated with fecal bacteria. The result was a constant burden of waterborne diseases. Dysentery, often called the bloody flux, was rampant and frequently fatal. Typhoid fever and various other gastrointestinal infections plagued medieval communities. They did not understand the link between contaminated water and these illnesses. They attributed them to the miasma, the bad air rising from the foul water. Their theory was wrong, but their instinct that the filth was the source of the sickness was tragically correct. The very convenience that carried the waste away from immediate view was poisoning them slowly and silently. The cesspits themselves posed another lethal threat: asphyxiation. The enclosed, decomposing waste produced a cocktail of toxic gases. An unwary person entering a poorly ventilated privy built over a deep cesspit, or a worker descending into one for cleaning, could be overcome by the fumes in minutes. This was the great occupational hazard of the gong farmer, but it could affect anyone. The price of convenience was living with a literal time bomb of filth and poisonous air buried in your own backyard. These were not abstract risks, but palpable fears and realities that would have shaped the experience of using these facilities. The nightmare was not just a matter of discomfort or social awkwardness, but of a genuine, if low-level, sense of physical dread. To feel this, let us place you back in that precarious seat, this time focusing not on the people around you, but on the very structure beneath you and the abyss that yawns below. Imagine you are in that castle garderobe once more. It is a stormy night. The wind, which you previously felt as a mere draft, is now a howling gale. It screams up the stone shaft, and the entire chamber, this little stone box you are in, seems to vibrate with the force of it. You can hear the stone of the castle itself groaning under the assault of the storm. You are sitting on a cold stone slab, suspended 100 feet in the air, and you cannot help but think about the mortar that holds these stones together. You wonder how old it is, who the mason was, and if he had a good day when he built this particular part of the wall. You glance down at the opening. It is a portal to a roaring, windy blackness. Tonight the darkness does not feel empty, it feels aggressive. Every gust of wind that blasts upwards feels like it is trying to push you off your seat. You grip the edges of the stone slab, your knuckles white. The stories you've heard in the great hall, told half in jest around the fire, come back to you. The story of the knight whose garderobe collapsed into the sea during a storm just like this one. The tale of the assassin who climbed a privy chute with a dagger between his teeth. The sense of vulnerability is overwhelming. You are in what should be a private, safe space, but you feel utterly exposed. You are exposed to the elements, the raging wind and driving rain that sometimes finds its way up the chute. You are exposed to the structural integrity of centuries-old stonework. And you are exposed, however theoretically, to the world below. That small opening is a breach in the fortress, a weak point, and you are sitting right on top of it. You no longer notice the smell. Your senses are entirely focused on survival. Your every muscle is tense. This is not a moment of relief. It is a moment of high anxiety. The convenience of not having to venture out into the storm to a windswept privy in the courtyard comes at a steep price. The psychological toll of confronting your own precarious position in the world. Your task is completed in record time. You do not linger for a second longer than necessary. You scramble out of the chamber, pulling the heavy curtain shut behind you as if to seal away the roaring monster of the storm. You hurry back to your bed, your heart still pounding. The warmth of your blankets feels like a return from a perilous journey. You lie there, listening to the storm rage outside the thick castle walls, and you understand. You understand that in this world, safety is an illusion, and even the most basic conveniences carry with them a hidden, terrifying cost. The precarious garderobes of castles and the surprisingly orderly reredoors of monasteries represent the two extremes of medieval sanitary design. One was a private, if perilous, luxury for the elite, while the other was a well-engineered communal solution for a disciplined spiritual body. But for the vast majority of people living in the Middle Ages, the artisans, the merchants, the laborers, and their families crammed into the burgeoning towns and cities, life was not lived at these extremes. Their daily reality was a patchwork of makeshift solutions, unwritten rules, and a kind of practical, everyday wisdom born of necessity. This was the world of the chamber pot, the cry of garde-le, and a constant, intimate negotiation with the challenges of urban sanitation. For the average town dweller, the most essential piece of sanitary hardware was not a room, but an object, the chamber pot. This humble vessel, often made of pottery and known colloquially in England as a Jordan, or a gazunder from goes under the bed, was the ubiquitous indoor toilet of the medieval home. It was kept under the bed or in a corner of the room, ready for use at any time, but especially during the night, saving its owners a cold and dangerous trip to an outdoor privy. Chamber pots were a feature of life for everyone, from the modest craftsman to the wealthy merchant, who might own a more ornate version made of pewter. The existence of the chamber pot solved the immediate problem of convenience, but it created another, larger one, disposal. What did one do with the contents in the morning? In a crowded, multi-story urban house with no plumbing and no sewer connection, the answer was simple and direct. It went out the window. This led to the infamous garde-le system, a term derived from the French warning, garde as l'eau, watch out for the water. Before emptying the pot, a person was expected, by custom if not always by law, to shout this warning to any unsuspecting pedestrians below. The contents would then be tossed into the central gutter of the street, a channel designed to carry away rainwater and, by extension, all other forms of household and animal waste. This practice, repeated by hundreds of households every morning, transformed the medieval street into a temporary sewer. The central gutters would run with a foul mixture of human waste, animal dung from roaming pigs and dogs, kitchen scraps, and waste from workshops like tanneries and slaughterhouses. The hope was that the next heavy rain would come soon and wash the accumulated filth down towards the nearest river. On dry days, the stench would fester and intensify under the sun. This daily reality is one of the primary reasons medieval cities had such a reputation for being smelly and unsanitary. The horrible nature of the toilet was not confined to the moment of use. It spilled out and characterized the entire urban environment. This then brings us to another intensely practical and personal question, a detail so mundane it was rarely considered worthy of being written down. What did people use instead of toilet paper? The answer, again, lies in a form of resourceful wisdom. using whatever nature and circumstance provided. For the common folk and peasantry, the materials were gathered from the world around them. One of the most popular choices was sphagnum moss. It was plentiful in many regions, wonderfully soft, and highly absorbent. Interestingly, sphagnum moss also has natural antiseptic properties, which, while unknown to medieval people, may have made it a surprisingly hygienic choice. Other common materials included handfuls of hay, straw, grass, or ferns. The choice would depend on the season and what was readily available. Broad, soft leaves from non-poisonous plants were also used. This reliance on natural materials meant there was a seasonal rhythm to personal hygiene. The soft leaves of summer might give way to the rougher straw of winter. In colder climates, a handful of snow was reportedly a brisk and effective, if shocking, alternative. For the wealthy, the standard was a step up, but still a world away from our manufactured paper. They used scraps of cloth, or rags, typically from worn-out linen or wool clothing. Linen, being softer and more absorbent, was the preferred material. These rags were a commodity. In a world where textiles were handmade and expensive, no scrap of cloth was wasted. It raises the rather grim question of whether these cloths were washed and reused. While we have little direct evidence, given the value of linen, it is certainly a possibility, though not a pleasant one to contemplate. It's in these small, unrecorded details that the chasm between their daily reality and our own feels widest. Some historians and archaeologists have even analyzed the contents of ancient cesspits to find evidence of these materials, confirming the use of moss and textile fragments in a very direct, if unsavory, way. This is a perfect example of a detail so common and everyday that it was rarely written about, forcing us to piece together the truth from botanical evidence and a common-sense understanding of their world. This patchwork of chamber pots, street gutters, and natural wipes formed the daily reality for the average person. It was a life lived in close quarters with waste, a life that required a certain resilience and a different set of social norms. To truly feel the texture of this life, let us place you within it. Imagine you are the spouse of a skilled artisan, a baker, perhaps, living in a tall, narrow, timber-framed house on a busy street in 14th century York. Your family lives and works in the same building. The bakery and shop are on the ground floor, and your cramped living quarters are on the 2 floors above. Your day begins before dawn. The first task, after stoking the oven's embers back to life, is to deal with the chamber pots from the night before. You gather the heavy ceramic pots from each sleeping area. Taking a deep breath, you lean out of the second-story window that overlooks the narrow street. You look left, then right. The street is mostly empty at this early hour, but you shout the customary warning anyway, your voice sharp in the morning chill. Garde-la! You then quickly and carefully empty the contents into the cobblestone gutter below. You hear a similar cry from your neighbor's window, followed by another splash. You quickly pull the wooden shutter closed, not just against the cold, but against the smell that immediately begins to rise from the street. This is your first task of every day. It is not remarkable. It is simply work to be done. Later in the morning, you must go to the market to buy flour and barley. You put on your thickest shoes and, just outside your door, you step into your pattens, the wooden platforms that lift you an inch or two above the ground. The street is now a treacherous landscape. The central gutter is a slurry of the morning's refuse. A stray dog laps at it, and a few pigs, serving as the town's unofficial cleaning crew, root around for scraps. You walk carefully, your eyes constantly on the ground, picking your way across the cleaner parts of the street. The smell is a constant companion. It is the smell of your town, the smell of life, and you have long since learned to filter it out, just as you filter out the constant noise of cartwheels and shouting vendors. At the market, you might need to use the public privy. It is a simple wooden structure built over a small, sluggish stream at the edge of the square. It offers little privacy and even less cleanliness. But it is a functional necessity. Your visit is quick and businesslike. There is no lingering, no comfort. It is another small, unpleasant task in a day filled with them. In the afternoon, you might send one of your children out to the edge of town, past the city walls where things are greener, to gather a basket of fresh moss. This will be dried and stored for the family's use. The child sees this not as a chore, but as an adventure, a chance to play in the fields for a while. This is the simple, domestic wisdom of your life. You use what the world provides. As evening falls, you prepare the family meal. The chamber pots are brought back inside, ready for the night ahead. The day's waste sits in the street outside, waiting for the next rain or the next morning's new additions. As you lie down to sleep, the sounds of the city die down, but the faint, ever-present smells of life, decay, and close living seep into your dreams. This is the horrible reality of the medieval toilet for the common person. It is not a single, terrifying event like a collapsing garderobe. It is a constant, grinding, low-level assault on the senses. It is the endless cycle of filling and emptying, the daily navigation of filth, the resourcefulness of using a leaf or a handful of moss. It is a life without the invisible, miraculous infrastructure of sanitation that we take for granted. And yet, for you, as a 14th century baker's wife, it is simply life. It is the backdrop against which all other dramas of family, work, love, and faith take place. Throughout our journey into the uncomfortable past, we have explored the medieval toilet as a place of surprising social dynamics and very real physical dangers. But perhaps the most pervasive and defining aspect of this nightmare was not something seen or touched, but something deeply and constantly inhaled. The medieval world was one of potent smells, and sanitation, or the lack thereof, was the primary author of this olfactory landscape. More than anything else, the experience of the medieval toilet was a story told in scent, and this story created one of the clearest and most profound divisions between the classes. The nightmare was not experienced equally. It was a stratified reality, and one's place in society could be measured by how effectively one could escape the stench. For the nobility, life was a constant, strategic battle against the encroachment of foul odors. Their belief in miasma, that bad air caused disease, gave this battle a sense of life or death urgency. Their wealth and power were therefore deployed to create a sensory bubble, an island of relative pleasantness in a pungent world. This began with the design of their homes. In a castle or a great manor house, garderobes were thoughtfully placed. They were often situated in projecting towers or wings, as far as possible from the main living and sleeping areas like the Great Hall and the Solar. Corridors and antechambers acted as buffers, preventing the smells from wafting directly into the heart of domestic life. The second line of defense was labor, specifically, the labor of servants. The lord and lady were insulated from the most unpleasant realities of their own bodily functions. A servant would be responsible for emptying the chamber pot, for cleaning the garderobe, for ensuring a supply of fresh moss or linen rags was available. This delegation of tasks created a physical and psychological distance from the waste itself. The noble experienced the convenience of the privy, but the servant handled the messy consequences. The final, and perhaps most elaborate, defense was an offense of pleasant smells. The medieval elite waged a fragrant war against miasma. The floors of their chambers were not bare stone, but were strewn with fresh, aromatic herbs. Sweet-smelling rushes, lavender, chamomile, mint, and rose petals would be laid down, and their scent would be released as people walked on them, masking other, less pleasant odors. The air would be sweetened with incense, often expensive imported resins like frankincense, burned in metal censers. Personal hygiene involved washing with water infused with fragrant herbs and flowers. And most telling of all was the pomander. This was a small, perforated ball, often made of silver or gold, filled with a mixture of potent aromatic substances like ambergris, musk, cloves, and other spices. A noble would carry this pomander on a chain, holding it to their nose when navigating a particularly smelly part of their castle or a crowded town street, creating a personal bubble of perfumed air. Life for the wealthy was a curated sensory experience, a constant effort to replace the smells of decay and filth with the smells of perfume and spice. For the common people, the poor and the laboring classes, this reality was completely inverted. They did not have the luxury of creating a sensory bubble. They were immersed within the stench. In a cramped, one-room hut shared by a peasant family and possibly their livestock, there was no escaping the smells of life. In a crowded town house, the living, sleeping, and working spaces were all in close proximity to the sources of waste. The chamber pot in the corner, the overflowing gutter just outside the window. The smell of human and animal waste, of rotting garbage in the streets, of the various smelly trades like tanning and butchering, was not an occasional nuisance to be masked, but the very air they breathed. The herbs and spices used by the nobility were expensive, imported luxuries, far beyond the reach of a commoner. Their world was not scented with lavender and frankincense, but with the raw, earthy smells of wood smoke, sweat, damp earth, and decay. This created a profound sensory chasm between the classes. The wealth and status of a nobleman could almost be measured by the pleasantness of his immediate environment. A clean and sweet-smelling home, and a body perfumed with expensive scents, were the ultimate luxuries, declarations of a life removed from the common, foul-smelling reality of the world. No one understood this olfactory divide better than the servants who had to navigate it every single day. There were the bridges between these two sensory worlds, their lives a constant journey back and forth across this invisible, yet powerful, frontier. To truly understand this gap, let us place you in their shoes. Imagine you are a young woman, a maidservant in the household of a powerful and wealthy lady in the 15th century. Your day begins in your lady's bedchamber, long before she herself awakens. You move quietly, opening the heavy shutters to let in the first, pale light of dawn. The air in this room is carefully managed. It smells of the lavender that is kept in sachets among the linen sheets, of the beeswax used to polish the wooden furniture, and of the faint, lingering scent of the rosewater your lady uses on her skin. It is a soft, clean, and calming space, a world constructed to be pleasant. One of your first duties is to attend to the chamber pot from the night. It is a fine piece of painted porcelain, kept discreetly inside a wooden cabinet known as a closed stool. You avert your eyes as you lift it out. It is heavy. Holding it carefully away from your body, you carry it out of the chamber, down a long, drafty stone corridor, your footsteps silent on the rush-strewn floor. You take it to the designated garderobe used for this purpose, a simple, functional chamber at the end of a remote passage. You quickly empty the contents down the dark, windy chute, rinse the pot with cold water from a bucket left there, and wipe it clean. You experience the cold, the draft, and the foul smell of the shaft, but only for a moment. This is the noble's experience of waste disposal, filtered through your labor. Later, you descend to the great kitchens to fetch your lady's morning cup of warmed, spiced wine. The sensory world shifts dramatically. Here, the air is thick with the smells of the previous night's feast, grease, roasting meat, stale wine, all mixed with the sharp tang of wood smoke from the massive hearths and the very human smell of a dozen kitchen workers already busy at their tasks. It is a loud, chaotic, and pungent world, but it is a world of productive, necessary smells. After your lady is dressed and has taken her breakfast, you might be sent on an errand into the town, perhaps to the weaver to collect a new piece of silk. You leave the relative cleanliness of the castle grounds through the main gate, and the full sensory reality of the medieval city hits you like a physical blow. The air is a thick soup of smells. The stench from the central gutter, where the morning's chamber pots have been emptied, is sharp and overwhelming. You smell the raw, metallic scent of the butcher's shop, the acrid smell from the tanner's yard, the press of unwashed bodies, the stink of animal dung. You find yourself breathing shallowly, through your mouth, trying not to inhale too deeply. The contrast between this world and the lavender-scented chamber you left just an hour ago is staggering. It is as if you have traveled between two different planets. You hurry through your errand, eager to return to the managed air of the castle. As you re-enter, you are keenly aware of the scents you carry back with you on your clothes and in your hair, the dust and grime of the street. You feel the need to wash, to cleanse yourself of the outside world before re-entering your lady's pristine presence. You are the bridge. You live your life crossing this sensory chasm, day after day. You understand, in a way your lady never can, that her pleasant-smelling world is not a given. It is an expensive, fragile construction, built on the labor of people like you, and walled off from the raw, reeking reality of the world in which most people live. You understand that status has a scent. Power smells of beeswax, rosewater, and spice. Poverty smells of sweat, damp, and decay. The horrible medieval toilet is not just a place, but a condition. And your proximity to it, your daily journey from the perfumed chamber to the foul street and back again, defines your exact place in the great, unwritten hierarchy of the world. The long day ends. The fires in the great castle are banked one by one, and a deep silence falls over the stone walls. The world, with its stark sensory divisions, prepares for sleep. The lord and lady retire to their lavender-scented chambers, protected from the cold and the stench. In the city below, families huddle together in their cramped rooms, the smell of the day's filth still lingering in the streets. This chasm of scent, this invisible wall between the worlds of the rich and the poor, was perhaps the most profound and most horrible aspect of the medieval toilet. It was a daily reminder that while all people share the same basic needs, they do not share the same reality. And so, the memory of that world fades, like a scent upon the wind. The sharpness of the ammonia from the garderobe chute, the earthy dampness of the moss, the cloying stench of the city gutter, these are sensations our modern world has largely erased. We have sanitized the past in our minds, imagining it as a tapestry of grand deeds and noble figures, forgetting the powerful, defining smells that were the constant companions of daily life. We have forgotten that for centuries, civilization was a battle not just for power or for faith, but a simple, desperate battle against the miasma. By remembering this forgotten scent, we can understand the true luxury of breathing clean air, the quiet miracle of a world where the nightmare has, for the most part, been washed away. Let this thought be a comfort, a gentle reminder of the peace we inhabit, as the story of this pungent past dissolves into the clean, quiet air of the night. Sleep well.